Hey folks, Jeff and Lorena here at Back to Country. If you've been following our journey, you know we're building a homestead from the dirt up. And in order to do that, we needed to buy a lot of equipment to get this dirt work done. Well, unless you're rich and can afford brand new equipment, you better plan on working on it if you buy the old stuff. And some of the most common things that happen with the old stuff is basically seals, O-rings, a lot of hydraulic stuff, hoses. Basically any of these old parts of rubber or plastic, they just wear out over time. Sometimes if they're just sitting even, they rot, no different than a tire on your car that dry rots over time. That's what happens to all the seals and everything. So this older equipment, you're always gonna have to worry about O-rings, seals, mostly hydraulic parts, hoses, and today we're going to work on a cylinder that blew out the seals on it. So this video is going to show you how to do a basic repair on a hydraulic cylinder. And so I'm going to show you the cylinder. That's probably one of your top things that goes wrong with these older pieces of equipment. This thing is covered with different hydraulic cylinders. Hydraulics run everything on this thing. So between hoses and cylinders, that's going to be your number one thing that goes out. So in this case, we got this cylinder right in here that is the steering cylinder. And basically it blew a seal in here, possibly inside, and it was just spraying hydraulic fluid out the side. So if you can't hold your hydraulic fluid, basically since the whole machine runs on hydraulics, that's where you die. So the first thing we got to do in order to fix this is pull the cylinder off. So if we look at the cylinder, we see that it's mounted at two separate points. We've got a mount down here, which is a bolt that's basically a steering pin that goes through. And then we've got another one over there that bolts it to the frame. So you also have this bolt here that sticks it to the pin. You could maybe unscrew it there, but I sure wouldn't do that because this thing appears to be adjusted with your steering. So I wouldn't want to pull that off and mess it up and maybe knock it out of alignment or whatever. The truth is, I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm not a mechanic by trade. I never was. You know, I'm just what I would call a good old country boy that ain't afraid to work on stuff. So the more you do, the more you learn. And this thing, like I say, we look at it and analyze. So we got a cotter pin here that keeps this bolt on. And basically this bolt, you know, reminds me of a tie rod end or something like that you would find on a regular automobile. This ain't nothing to be afraid of. So we've got to get this cotter pin out of here so that we can undo the bolt. And the problem we run into on these things is, you know, this pin's been in here for a long time. And so there's our first challenge. The pin is, you know, stuck in there a little bit. It's moving. I didn't, of course, bring a hammer. You know, that's the other thing. You try to get ready for a job that you're going to do, and you bring your tools over, and you never tend to get everything you need. That's just the way it goes. And when that happens, you can either go back and get the tool, or you can just keep fighting it. That's the other thing. When you're working on the old equipment, you better have some patience, because it's going to try your patience every step of the way. You figure things are rusted, corroded, or they just got a ton of dirt and grease packed in them, and that just makes everything harder to do. But it's not impossible. And there we go, just like that, we got it out. So, not impossible to do. Next thing we're gonna do is just pull the bolt off. Take the nut off so that we can see if that pin will come out of there. And this is a big 3/4 inch ratchet. When you work on this big equipment, you better get some bigger tools. And even this thing doesn't want to budge. And so I'm going to need a cheater bar just to loosen that. So this is a cheater bar, and you put a pipe or something on the end of a wrench to get more leverage. And bam, we broke it free. So when you're old and maybe not as strong as you used to be, sometimes it's just a matter of using a little leverage. Once we broke it free, it's good to go. And it should have been, because it was lubricated with all kinds of hydraulic fluid when it broke. Okay, so we got that nut loose. Probably going to want to give it a whack with a hammer to get it out of there. And of course, once again, I didn't carry a hammer over here. Thought about it like 7 different times. Forgot it every time. That's the way it goes. So the next thing we're going to do is undo these hydraulic lines. And like I say, everything's good and oiled because it sprayed oil all over everything. So that's, I guess, helpful, because nothing seems to be sticking or anything. So that's a plus. Makes the job a little bit easier when you don't have to fight rusted bolts and stuff all along the way. This thing is just a matter of getting in there and getting on it. There's not a lot of space to work with, and the nut seems to be a little bit damaged from previous wrenches on it, whatever. Doesn't want to fit the wrench easily. There it goes. But I can see where the corners are rounded a little bit. That's the other thing I'll say. When you work on stuff, try to prevent tearing it up and doing more damage to it than you're trying to repair. A lot of people get in a hurry on fixing equipment. I've seen a lot of repairs that have been made to my equipment in the past that are what I call field fixes, which basically means instead of getting the correct part or doing the work to fix it correctly, they were more interested in keeping it on the job. So they did some half-ass repair, like for example, instead of putting where a bolt busted or something and drilling it out, tapping it, and fixing it correctly. They just weld it, which then means that next time you got to fix it, it's going to be way more difficult to fix. Same thing when you round off bolts and stuff, nuts, then it makes the wrenches not go on like they should, and just gets harder and harder to work with this stuff. Guess that's why they invented crescent wrenches. But crescent wrenches round it off. So before I put this back together, I'll probably take a file and clean this up so that I don't have to fight it every step of the way later on. Like I say, nothing about this job is difficult. It's just a matter of being willing to do it and get your hands a little bit dirty and, you know, take a chance that you might not know how to do it right away, but you learn as you go. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. Like I say, I'm not a mechanic, but I guess I'm kind of becoming one. But every bit of it, I'm learning as I go. I haven't been to a formal school. I haven't had mechanics come out and train me. I don't even have a mechanic mentor that I can talk to and say, hey, what's the easiest way to do this job? Sometimes I'll do a little bit of research on maybe YouTube or something like that and see if there's anything out there that kind of shows how to do something, and occasionally you might find something. A lot of this old equipment though, there's just not that much on it. And the good news is it's not that hard. You just learn as you go. Now, when I buy a piece of equipment, one of the first things I try to do is I try to find the repair manual for it. So some of these older equipment, the repair manual is hard to come by. This machine here is a Galleon S500E. I can't find any manual on it at all. The only thing I ever found online searching was a sales brochure, so that sure as heck doesn't help me. Problem is, this company doesn't exist anymore. It was sold to Dresser, and then Dresser sold everything to Komatsu, so company doesn't even exist anymore. So that, of course, makes it more challenging to find parts or anything else. See if we can get this other pin off. So one of the other things you want to do is find places that can that sell parts to fix these things. So when it comes to rebuilding a cylinder or a hose, there's a lot of companies out there that actually build hoses and sell theirs. So here, for example, in Longview, Texas, there's a place called Axion, and they build hydraulic hoses, and their prices are pretty fair. Pretty much every town you go to, somewhere around, you can find a place that builds hydraulic hoses. Now some places are pretty high dollar and other places are reasonable, so you do need to pay attention to what they charge, because I don't remember, there was one place I looked at and man, they were a ripoff. They really wanted a fortune for hoses, and so needless to say, I didn't do business with them. And then there's also a company called Crown Products, and they sell like O-rings and all the different, you know, internal plastic seals and pieces for all these cylinders. And so basically you rip the cylinder apart, and then you take it to them with all the parts, and they'll measure and find you every piece you need, and basically make it so you can rebuild this cylinder. So even though the factory is long closed and you can't get parts for these anymore, I don't need parts. I just need the seals and stuff to be able to rebuild. And so knowing that there is a store out there or a business that sells all that stuff has helped me immensely. And I did learn that from some local folks that were willing to share information and tell me where I could get parts like that. And so I've gotten to know a lot of the different industrial dealers and stuff around here for everything from the parts I just talked about to bearings and motors and all kind of stuff, just by shopping around. So now I've got to get these two pins out, and so I believe that's going to require a little ball peen hammer, so I got to go get that. Okay, we got our hammer and we're ready to go. So the first thing I'll tell you, when you're going to start banging on something, best to leave the nut on it. And the reason is because if I just bang on that pin by itself, chances are I'm going to tear up the threads, and then I'm going to create a bunch more work for myself to have to try to cut new threads on that or recut those threads. So if you leave the nut on, then that prevents, or should prevent, from damaging that bolt. And so the first thing we notice is it does not want to break free. So, story of my life. Usually when I work on these things, that's always the way it goes. It just never is real simple. So you just got to keep working at it and figure it out. So let me see if this other side is any better. Put the nut back on there so I don't tear up those threads, and see if, yeah, so this side much better. You can see the pin coming out. So once it's inside the mount, the threads are somewhat protected, so I can tap it a little bit, but I'm still gonna need a punch or something to knock that out the rest of the way. And try to give this a couple more taps. Oh, there it goes, it broke free. So, probably saw that give way there. And of course now it just spins. So once I broke it free, then it's got nothing to hold the pin, so the pin just turns on the nut. That's, see if we can put a little pressure on it. And sure enough, by lifting it up and putting a little pressure on it, that stopped it from spinning. So we're able to get the nut off. I don't want it to drop out, so I'll leave that on there just a little bit. And I got to get a punch to try to drive that other bolt up through to release the other end. Okay, on my way to find a punch, I came across this little piece of rebar, and you know what? It'll work just as good as a punch, so I just grabbed it. And we got that baby out. So now I'm sure there's some mechanics out there that could probably say, well, if you had done this or that, or done it this way or that way, it'd be a lot easier. And you know, maybe it would. That's what experience gives you. When you're a mechanic and you got experience and you do this stuff over and over and hang out with other mechanics, then you start to pick up all those tips and learn those things. I'm showing you that you don't have to know all the knowledge of a mechanic to be able to do this stuff. You just got to be willing to give it a try. So that's the main thing. Don't be afraid to jump in and get your hands dirty and work on something. And there we go. And so you can see this has like a little bushing on it that probably hasn't been lubricated or worked with in 50 years. I don't know how many years actually. I don't even know what year this machine was made. If I had to guess, I would say this machine dates back to the 70s, but I honestly do not know because I've never been able to find a good manual for it, or even a lot of information that says what year they were built or anything. I saw one sales brochure for sale. I wasn't going to pay 15 bucks for a dang sales brochure. It's pretty much worthless to me. I needed the manual on how to fix this stuff, not a brochure on where to buy one or how they sold them back in the day. So fortunately, when it comes to hydraulic cylinders, there's really not that much difference. I mean, a hydraulic cylinder is a hydraulic cylinder, so once you've rebuilt one, then it's really not that bad to do another one because they're all basically the same. They've got a whole bunch of different seals and Teflon parts in there, seals and wipes, and I don't remember what all the pieces and parts are called, but it's not that bad. So the next thing we'll do is we need to open this thing up. So looking at it, you can see there's threads right here. So that tells us that this end is the end that unscrews. And you know, I'm doing this, you know, this would be considered out in the field because I don't have a shop or anything that I'm working with. So the challenge now is going to be, how do we get this end cap off? How do we hold this thing? You know, so I guess I could have left one of the pins on and left that thing bolted up to hold it while I you know, get a wrench on it and try to loosen that end cap. But I didn't, so, you know, I look around and see, well, is there something else that could help? Here I see a long bolt, and oh, it just happens to to fit through there. So now I wedged it on that bolt, and so that should hold it while I try to get a wrench on this thing and get this thing loose. So some of these use what's called a spanner wrench. This particular one, I don't see any holes for a spanner wrench. So judging from the marks on the outside of this, it looks like in the past somebody probably used a pipe wrench to get it off. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a big pipe wrench and see if we can get that thing knocked free. So this here is a 48-inch pipe wrench. I got this for drilling pipe. So I didn't buy it for this particular task. However, it seemed like it would be a good tool to use because I can get leverage on it. Now, I don't know how tight this thing is going to be to break free, so I can tell you right now it ain't simple. Well, that's the bad news. The bad news is it does not want to break free. Huh. Of course, I can't tell if the threads are left-handed threads or not either, so I'll try to give it a go the other direction just to see if that makes a difference, but I would be surprised if it's left-handed threads. Nope. Does not want to budge at all. So typically when these things don't want to budge, then you got to get the torch out and put some heat to them. So we're going to give this another go before we move it over and torch it. Ow! Ah, that was smart. So it broke free and I dropped to a knee and slammed my face on the side of the machine. That didn't feel good, but that's the way it goes. Suck it up and move on. The good news is it broke free. See, once it initially broke, now it just threads right off. This is the reality of working on stuff, especially when you don't know what the hell you're doing. You just go for it. Okay. Oh, that's nice. So it's still got some hydraulic fluid in it. So as we pull it apart, it's spraying out that fluid. I'm basically just tapping it, trying not to do any damage, but working it out so that it all comes apart slowly but surely. And you can see it's coming little by little. Here's the inner workings of the cylinder. So if we look at it closely, we got a nut here that we'll have to take off, and then this will come apart. So you got a Teflon piece right here, and then you got another piece right there, and then you got an O-ring right there, followed by another little Teflon piece. And this is metal, so that's all the casing. And then you've got a seal in the end that we don't know if that's the only part that went bad, but basically it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And so those 5 pieces, okay, and then there's another seal in there, so at least 6 pieces. This will be, I don't know, I'll follow up with how much it costs, but I mean, this is, you know, $10, $15, maybe $20 worth of parts. And the hardest part is just what we just did, taking it apart. So we'll get this other bolt off, and I'm going to pretty much do the same thing that I've done thus far. Going to get a wrench on it. We're going to see if we can, I guess, put this pin back in the hole over here. And of course, not from the top side. It's got to come from the bottom up because it's tapered. So I'm just putting it back in the hole so that, because I don't have a vise out here. So if I had a vise, I'd just throw it in a vise, or even a big press or something to hold it, but I don't have any of that out here, so I work with what I got. And what I got is the original hole that it was in. So I'll put it back in there, and that's gonna hold it so that I can try to loosen this nut. Of course, not a lot of room to work here, so you got to be a little bit of a contortionist to do it this way, but like I say, you work with what you got. So the good news is it broke free. Someday I'll have a nice shop to do all this kind of stuff in, but so far I don't have one, and that's why we're here. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build this pad. So we're on the side of a hill, move dirt and get this pad built up so that we can build a big shop on the side of it. Then we're going to build living quarters in that shop, and that's our first planned structure for this property, and that's what's going to help us to be able to move out here. Okay, there's another O-ring there. So O-rings are cheap, first of all. You know, we're talking pennies, not dollars. So, you know, a lot of these parts are, you know, nickel parts. Like, you know, that's a less than 25-cent O-ring. And the truth is, I probably have some here already because I stock a lot of O-rings. I buy O-ring kits and stuff because a lot of these old machines, these O-rings wear out. And It's a lot easier to just reach in a kit and get a new O-ring out and replace the O-ring than run to town and buy O-rings. Or of course, even worse, to hire somebody to come out and do it, because then they're gonna get you for, you know, $100 or more an hour labor, and they're gonna get you on the parts. They're gonna make money on everything, and you're gonna lose money on everything. So when you're doing this for yourself, you gotta be able to think, you know, how do I do it faster, cheaper, whatever. So, you know, you might wonder, as a homesteader, why did I buy all this equipment? Well, the reality is, when I look at the dirt work that I want to do, labor is not cheap. So if I got to hire somebody to come out here and move all this dirt, I mean, I can tell you, I know for a fact that the dirt work I've done already is easily $50,000 worth of dirt work. So it's a lot cheaper to buy this equipment and do it myself than it is to hire somebody to come out and do it. If I had just like one little small job, sure, you can hire somebody to come out and do a small job, and you know, it'd be the smarter way to go. But I'm doing a big job, and I plan on doing lots of jobs, not just a little one. So I got big plans. This is a 100-acre property. I got a lot of plans for this property. I'm building a pad to build a house on. I'm building a pad to build a shop on. I'm building roads. The big dream is, when all that's done, I'd like to build a lake. So I got a lot of jobs that I want to do. And the reality is that it is a heck of a lot cheaper for me to buy equipment, even to maintain it, and do the work myself, than to hire somebody and pay, you know, hundreds if not thousands of hours of labor to do all that kind of stuff. So bottom line is, you know, do it yourself. You can do it. And here's the other significant piece of this. When I'm done with this equipment, I'm going to sell it. If I don't need it anymore, I'm not going to keep it around. So for example, this piece of equipment right here, this is a motor grader, and this isn't a little one. This is a big piece of machinery. It's got I think a 14-foot mold board on it. This is a big machine, and these are expensive machines. Now, I saw a smaller machine sell for about $12,500, and that's one of the cheapest machines that I saw sell on the open market. These things can be hard to come by, and they can sell for a lot of money when they're in working condition. With delivery and everything, I've got about $7,000 into this machine. So when I'm done with it, I should be able to get my money back at a minimum. Maybe I can even turn a little profit. And if I can turn a little profit on it, then that made it even more worth it. So if you shop around, first thing you got to do when you want a piece of equipment, study that equipment. Study what it sells for. You can do searches all day long on the internet and come up with a million different sites that sell equipment. You can look in your local Craigslist, you can look on Facebook Marketplace. There are a lot of sources out there for equipment. Start pricing it out, paying attention to makes, models, years, sizes, horsepower, all that kind of stuff, and start studying up on whatever piece of equipment it is you want. And then I would say start watching the auctions. The auction I like the best is auctiontime.com, but there are a lot of different auctions out there. Now, one of the reasons why I like auctiontime.com is a lot of their stuff comes without a buyer's premium. Buyer's premium basically means that, let's say I'm a equipment distributor or whatever, or a reseller, and I put a piece of equipment on that auction. I got to pay the auction a fee to have them auction it off. And then I also want to make sure those fees are covered and that I'm guaranteed a little bit of profit. So maybe I put anywhere from a 3 to 15% buyer's premium, which means whatever you pay for it at auction, you're going to pay an additional 3 to 15% on top of that. I don't like buyer's premiums. I don't want to have to do the extra math. I just want to know, hey, this is what I'm going to pay. Because I know that the other thing I got to do is I got to pay transport. So a piece of equipment like this don't move itself. And one of the reasons why I bought this particular equipment is because it was close to here. So I knew I wasn't going to have to pay thousands of dollars to ship it. But it still cost me $500 to ship it less than 50 miles. So you're going to have to pay somebody to move this big equipment. And the bigger it is, the more challenges you have. So if it's oversized, for example, the trucker has to have permits for oversize and things like that, which can cost extra money, so that's going to raise the price up higher. One piece of equipment that I got, let's see, that dual drum compactor. When I bought that, I bought it at auction, and then I went on, and I can't remember, but some of the auctions have like different freight brokers, and so you can go out to these different freight brokers and you can put in what you need to move, and then they'll come back with bids to move it. Other brokers basically come back and they bid what they'll charge to move it, and so that's a way to get it moved as cheap as possible. So you can do pretty good on moving stuff, but you should know that up front. When you buy a piece of equipment, know what it's going to cost you. And I'll tell you what, auctions, it's easy to get carried away. It's easy to get caught up in the bidding and pay more than you should have for it. This piece of equipment here, I only wanted to pay $6,000 for it, and I'll tell you, I'm just as guilty. I got caught up in the bidding, and I got it up to like $64.50, and then I quit. I said, oh man, I've already gone higher than I wanted to go. I walked away from it, and somebody else won the bid, but that somebody else never followed through. So then the auction company called me a couple weeks later and said, hey, do you still want it? And basically the owner gave them permission to sell it to the number 2 bidder at the price that the final price that I bid. So that's why I paid $6,450 for it, and then I had it shipped here. It cost me $500 to bring it in on a truck, and then I paid a little bit more money to put into it doing some different work. So I'm right about $7,000 on it, maybe a little over. Now I'm going to be a little bit over that, but the reality is it'll pay for itself. And this particular piece of equipment, I don't know if I'll keep it or sell it. I sure like what it can do to fix up my roads, because the roads are a pain in the butt here. I got heavy rain and erosion. If you follow the site, you know. So anyway, that's where we're at. We've got it taken apart. Now it's just a matter of pulling all the different O-rings and stuff off. We'll carry that into town to the store, and we'll get it all, and then we'll film again when we put it back together. So stay with us.